In the dry summer of 1887, when the salt wind crawled across the Arizona territory and the sun baked the land until it cracked, like old pottery, a lone farmer named Elias Ward lived in silence on the edge of the San Pedro Basin, content with the company of his cattle, his axe, and the whispering cottonwoods that lined the riverbank. He was a man who had seen, too, much war in the civil unrest and had chosen peace instead of noise, land instead of liquor, solitude instead of bullets, but everything changed the evening. A shadow big enough to eclipse his porch lantern fell across his cabin door, followed by a trembling voice that carried both strength and desperation as it whispered, "Please, I'm starving for a man's touch, your help." And when Elias opened the door, his breath caught like a lasso tightening around his ribs, because standing before him was the tallest woman he had ever seen, an Apache girl built like the mountain tribes, towering nearly 7 feet. Broad-shouldered, powerful, yet trembling like a leaf in a storm. Her copper-brown skin was streaked with dust, her long black hair tangled with pine needles, and her eyes, huge, amber, afraid, locked onto him as though he were the only lifeline in a world determined to wipe her away. And Elias's instinct, shaped by years of loss, told him to step back. But something about the pain in her voice froze him to the ground. She introduced herself as Kaya of the Eagle clan, the last surviving daughter of a tribe that had been attacked by mercenaries, hired by a railroad baron who wanted their land emptied, and she had escaped only by sheer force, running for days through heat and thorns until her legs nearly gave out. And though her words, "starving for a man's touch," made Elias's heart hammer, she quickly clarified, her voice shaking, that she meant starving for help, protection, and human kindness, because she had not eaten in 3 days, had not slept in 4, and had not spoken to anyone since her entire world burned to the ground. And Elias, though cautious, stepped aside and let her in, offering water, venison stew, and a place by the fire. As she ate, tears streaked down her dust-covered cheeks, and she told him the truth. The mercenary leader, Rourke Maddox, a brutal ex-soldier with a scar across his jaw, believed Kaya carried something worth a fortune, an artifact her tribe had guarded for centuries, and he would not stop hunting her until he had it, even if he had to burn every homestead from Tucson to Prescott. Elias, listening carefully, realized the danger he had let into his home. But when Kaya suddenly collapsed from exhaustion and her enormous frame shook with quiet sobs, something inside Elias, something he thought had died with his wife years ago, stirred with fierce protectiveness. And as she slept on his cot, curled awkwardly because she was too tall for it, he sat by the window with his rifle watching the horizon, promising himself he would not let anyone harm her. But at dawn, the thunder of distant horses rumbled through the valley, and before Elias could even rouse Kaya, the sky filled with the dust clouds of approaching riders. And in that moment he understood the war she had brought with her. Yet instead of fear he felt a strange, powerful certainty rising in his chest, that maybe destiny hadn't sent the giant Apache girl to him for shelter, but because he was the only man stubborn enough to stand between her and danger, even if it meant putting his quiet life to flames. And as the riders' silhouettes grew sharper against the rising sun, Kaya rose behind him, towering like a myth made of bone and fury, whispering that she did not expect him to fight for her, but Elias only tightened his grip on the rifle and said in a low, steady voice, "No one takes what's under my roof." And the first shot, fired as the chapter closed, not on fear, but on the spark of something larger than either of them could name, something forged in fire and survival, something that would make viewers lean forward, breathless, begging for more. And if you want the second chapter, make sure to subscribe for the full Wild West saga. The morning the mercenaries descended on Elias Ward's farm like wolves in a canyon, the earth shook under their horses' hooves, and dust rose like smoke around their silhouettes as Kaya, now rested yet still weakened, stood beside Elias with her enormous hands clenched into fists, her height towering above him like a protective spirit of the old world. And while Elias knew the odds were impossible, 2 people against 12 armed, meant he felt an old fire awaken in him. The same fire that carried him through battles long before he swore he'd never raise a gun again. And when Rourke Maddox rode to the front, his cold eyes locking onto Kaya, he called out with a sneer dripping venom, demanding she be surrendered for the property she stole. But Kaya stepped forward with thunder in her lungs, telling him she carried no artifact, only her tribe's songs, their memories, their final prayers before they died, and Rourke only laughed, claiming memories were useless unless they could be sold. Elias saw Kaya's breath falter at the insult, and without hesitation, he raised his rifle and warned the mercenary leader that he was trespassing on private land. But before the last syllable left his mouth, gunfire erupted, bullets shredding the wooden porch around them, and Kaya reacted first, grabbing Elias by the waist and pulling him behind the stone water trough. His splinters flew like angry wasps, despite fear clawing at his throat. Elias fought with precision, taking down 2 riders, while Kaya, using nothing but strength and instinct, hurled a fallen fence post so hard it knocked another man from his saddle. But the battle was hopeless. They were surrounded, outgunned, and slowly pushed toward the barn, where Rourke ordered his men to burn them out like cornered animals. Flames burst up the dry hay walls, smoke billowing into the sky. And Kaya, coughing but determined, lifted a fallen beam long enough to create a path through the fire, dragging Elias out just as the barn collapsed behind them. The 2 fled into the canyon. But Rourke and 4 riders pursued, gunshots ricocheting off stone, and just when Elias thought they would be overwhelmed, Kaya led him into a narrow crevice known only to the tribes, a place of echoing stone and hidden pathways, where the mercenaries could not follow without dismounting. Here her grief finally broke, confessing that she had always been told she was too large, too strong, too much for her tribe, treated as a guardian rather than a girl, and now she feared even that role had failed because she could not save her family. But Elias placed a steady hand, gentle, grounding, on her arm and told her that strength didn't fail. It simply waited for the right place to rise, and perhaps fate had brought her to him not for rescue, but to rebuild something the world tried to destroy. With renewed determination, they set a trap in the canyon shadows, using the echoes to confuse the riders, and Kaya, moving with the power of legend, disarmed one, knocking another unconscious, while Elias, battered and burned from the barn fire, used his last bullet to force Rourke to drop his weapon. Kaya confronted the mercenary leader face to face, towering over him as he finally realized why her tribe had believed she was chosen by the spirits. But instead of killing him, she forced him to swear before the canyon, where echoes turned lies into curses, that he and his men would leave Apache lands forever. Terrified, Rourke agreed and fled, his remaining riders scattering. Once the threat was gone, Kaya sank to her knees, exhausted. But Elias caught her before she collapsed, promising she was no longer alone, promising that as long as he breathed, she would have a home, protection, and a future not built on running but on planting roots. And as the sun bled gold across the canyon walls, the 2 walked back toward the valley, toward Elias's ruined farm, which they would rebuild together, not as fugitives but as partners forged in fire, trust, and courage, an ending so powerful the viewers would be hooked for life. And before the credits rolled, the narrator would whisper, "If you want the next Wild West legend, hit subscribe. Your support keeps these tales alive."